welcome. We have a super exciting event today, designed for mobile VR. And our speaker is Sophia. I want to say thank you to our amazing host, Patrick, and give the word to him.
Welcome everyone to Echo User and to UXI. We're always happy to host. So Echo User, we're a user experience research and design company based here in the space. We are a company that takes research really to an in-depth level and really focus on complex projects as far as everything from social to consumer to B2B, all kinds of different enterprise projects and everything like that.
Hi guys. So before I do my talk, I wanted to get just a general understanding. Who here has tried virtual reality? Raise your hand. Okay, wow, a lot of you. Okay, who has tried something beyond Google Cardboard? Raise your hand. Okay, who has tried high-end virtual realities? This is the PlayStation VR, the HTC Vive, or the Oculus Rift. Okay, awesome. Cool. So we have a lot of mobile in here, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on. But I just wanted to start off and give an overarching themes of the industry and just like help everyone get on the same page. So I like to just start thinking about virtual reality in terms of what happened in 1996 and what happened in 2006. In 1996, everyone was like, why do I need the internet? Well, now we do everything on the internet and cannot think about life without the internet. In 2006, it was like, why do we need a smartphone? We didn't know that we'd be ordering everything from like our lunch every single day to ordering our car every single day. But we do, and so now the same theme is going to happen with virtual reality. And so why do I care about this? Right now I'm the entrepreneur in residence at Rothenberg Ventures. I'm building a mobile virtual reality startup that's based on discovery for mobile VR. And about 9 months ago, I launched a newsletter called All Things VR, and I did it because I wanted to help more people get into the virtual reality industry. And I was doing a lot of research on my own. People started coming to me with what's going on in VR. And now that I know it's expanded to a community, and I really hope that if you guys are interested in VR, you can sign up for the newsletter. I was also the first person to travel the world with Google Glass, which I think started this whole revolution of me being interested in ocular technologies, because I saw what it was like to talk to people around the world who were excited about the next evolution of mobile. And that's when I knew no matter what I did, I was going to be a part of the next generation of mobile. And I believe that it is virtual reality. So this is just a quick timeline of, or like table of contents of what I'll be going over today. So let's begin. So what is the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality? If you think about virtual reality, think about it as like it's an immersive experience. So you're trapped from the outside world. You're not like seeing the real world in front of you. You're just in a totally different world, and like physics and all these other things that happen in the real world don't matter. Versus an augmented reality, it's as if I were standing right here and, you know, like a seahorse were just floating around, or things could happen. The reason why we're not talking about augmented reality is because the devices have to get a lot smaller, and all of the advancements in virtual reality will affect the future of augmented reality. So the more that people are designing in 3D spaces, 360 spaces, that'll all influence augmented reality, but we're still a few years away from that. So that's why this talk, and that's why the hype around VR is so big right now, because it's actually tangible. So it's not cool to talk about virtual reality, but this is kind of what it looks like. This is somebody using the HTC Vive, and this is a game called Fantastic Contraption he's building in virtual reality. In mobile, it looks quite different. Oops. Yeah, so she's in an experience using mobile virtual reality. She's not using her hands or anything, but you know, she's sitting down. It's a much different experience. This is a guy playing Temple Run. So he's using his head, and I'll talk more about the interactions there. But it's much different than, you know, like actually building with your hands. So I wanted to give a quick history of virtual reality. Virtual reality is not new, and the concept of it has been around for quite some time. In 1960, Ivan Sutherland created the first headset because he wanted to create the ultimate graphic display. Obviously, no one would ever wear that, but at least he was trying. Then in the 1990s, I'm sure all of you have heard about virtual reality trying to take off then and why it didn't work. But actually the term virtual reality was coined in 1987, and this was one of the first guys to go out of business building a virtual reality company, but again, at least he tried. And then, of course, in the 1990s it failed because technology just wasn't there yet. Things were still really large, really expensive. The graphics, I think back to Mario Kart, and then you look at things that like Grand Theft Auto now, which is totally different worlds. And when you're in a VR headset, you want things to look more realistic. You don't want these little pixels like everywhere. When people started to really take the industry seriously was the launch of the Kickstarter campaign Oculus. In under 48 hours, it ended up raising $2.5 million, and people really took a look at that and were like, wow, okay, this is crazy. But I don't know if any of you tried the DK1, it made a lot of people sick. So it was kind of crazy to think that 29 months later, I believe, Facebook then bought them for $2 billion. This, what people in the industry say, was the turning point, because then that's when you started seeing VCs investing in virtual reality. That's when people started building companies around virtual reality, because they were like, all right, if the biggest company, Facebook, is looking at this as the next generation of mobile, then we should look at this too. And now there's millions of dollars being invested into virtual reality. These are some of the big brands that are associated with creating headsets for VR, AR, pouring money into virtual reality companies. So why did Facebook buy Oculus? Well, Mark Zuckerberg put out a statement that said it's the new communication platform, because he believes that if Facebook's mission is to connect the world, then imagine doing that. We don't even have to be here right now, and this, like the future of virtual reality, we could have this meetup at any time, place, and you guys could all feel like you were actually there without having to travel. We're not anywhere close to that, but that's the future of virtual reality, and this is why he bought Oculus and why he's a huge champion of virtual reality. So why now? This is, I think, probably a photo from the 90s, and all of these things now fit into that one smartphone. And our smartphones are so powerful, and they're getting more and more powerful year after year. So this is why I'm a huge believer in mobile virtual reality, and the high-end headsets are great, which I'll go into after this. But at the end of the day, like mobile has, every single person owns a mobile phone, not every single person owns a PC. And mobile phones can do a lot. Just like it has positional tracking, really great pixelated screens, and also the developer community for mobile VR is growing. So this is a glimpse at today's hardware. You guys are pretty well known, know a lot about this, but this is Google Cardboard, this is Samsung Gear, that's Oculus Rift, that's PlayStation VR, and this is the HTC Vive. These are the prices. Sometimes it's a little more expensive than $5, but it gives you a really good understanding of how much the headsets cost. Also, the Rift and the Vive, they still need to be powered by a like $1,200 PC. Maybe you can get a little cheaper, but at the end of the day, all in, you're going to be spending around $2,000, which is a huge investment. For the PlayStation, it's $499, then you need to have a PlayStation in order to use it. That has a lot more. There's 36 million PlayStations in the market today that can power a PlayStation 4, a PSVR. So everyone believes that the PSVR will probably do the best. But there's, I think, 300 million Samsung phones, so even if they got a small percentage of that, that's a lot of people who can get a Samsung Gear. And if you pre-order the S7, then you got a free Samsung Gear. So, that's amazing. And that's what we'll be trying today. I don't really believe in just market projections because I think that they're all bullshit. But I do believe that the amount of mobile VR that will be in the market is going to, as you can see here, far surpass the amount of PC VR. Because by 2020, our mobile phones would be so powerful, and even if we're not using our mobile phone or a VR headset, all of the chips and everything that's used to power mobile phones will be in a headset that is much, much smaller and can run a lot. So that's why I think that when you're developing for mobile VR, you're also thinking through a lot of the different problems that by 2020 we won't have to experience, because there'll be designers who have thought through, well, what if you don't have interactivity, you don't have controllers, what does that look like? And Google has been amazing, and they're really pushing for Google Cardboard and trying to make it so that way more people can experience virtual reality. This thing says that they've sold 5 million cardboards. That's not including all of the cardboards that are sold on Alibaba. And also, I think their app has been downloaded 25 million times. So that means, like tens of millions of people have already tried virtual reality, which is amazing. So now I want to get into the different types of input methods that allow you to use mobile virtual reality. The first one is the touchpad. This is on the Samsung Gear. You're just touching things to move forward, to click, and do other interactions depending on like what the creators enabled. This is the Google Cardboard trigger, which basically does the same thing. It's just like a click or a touch, but it's just a piece of metal and it triggers the phone screen. And then this is a gamepad, which I'm sure you guys have all seen before, but nobody in my mind is really going to carry around a gamepad. If they have a Samsung Gear, that's already one more thing that they have to remember. So I think when you're designing for mobile VR, you want to just maximize on these two interactions. This is another type of interaction. It's called gaze. And so, I don't know, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little white thing in the middle that helps you realize where you're going. And so you don't need your hands at all in these scenarios. All you have to do is based on where you're looking. The designer and the creators have mapped it out so that way when you look at something, it's triggered and then it's an event, and then interaction occurs. This is a little bit easier to tell. So I'm sure you guys have all heard of Monument Valley. This was Land's End that was created by the Monument Valley creators, and the entire experience is all gaze-based. And so they kind of set a precedent where it was like, this can be really relaxing, and so gaze is increasingly becoming like one of the main interactions, not only in mobile VR, but also in other virtual reality headsets. So I wanted to take a step back a little bit. I think it's a huge transition when you start designing for virtual reality, because you need to start transitioning your mind from thinking in 2D into confined spaces to something that's limitless. So this is, for example, 3D art that you would look at a museum, or this is, what Instagram looks like. But then when you think in 3D, this is with the HTC Vive, you now have all the space in the world. This doesn't have a menu, but for example, now you have to think about things when you are, does a menu have to be in front of your face? No, it doesn't, because it's not necessary. You can turn to your left, you can turn to your right, and interact with it, because it's not something you need to be in your face. First on Instagram, you always see the menu. So it's a huge transition, and when you begin to think differently about that, then it really starts to inspire you in ways of thinking about virtual reality. So 3D prototyping, there's multiple tools that you can use. My favorite happens to be Unity. There's also, you can use Unreal, which is actually quite a bit more complicated than Unity to pick up. Google Cardboard has been making a lot of efforts to help you design just with Android. So if you know a little bit about Android, or you are used to importing different icons into projects, then you can also do Google Cardboard. Or there's A-Frame, which is basically using HTML, JavaScript, and WebGL, and so that's more programming intensive, but still possible. In Unity, you don't need those tools. You don't need to have any programming background in order to make things possible. In order to design, I'm not a programmer, but I'm able to put things together with Unity, and I'll go into how. So Unity has by far the biggest resources for designing in virtual reality. This book is the first book that allowed me to create something in Unity. This discount code, which I have for you guys, allows you to buy at half price. I think that it's like $10, and you can learn how to do things in Google Cardboard. I built my first 360 photo viewer on there, and it talks you step by step. If you have any problems with it, feel free to reach out to me, and I can help you troubleshoot. Also, there's so many resources online about using the different UI components within Unity. What I would recommend is just starting with a project. So Unity has, I think, 7 VR tutorials that you can do. Do the one that's most interesting to you, and then it helps you go through the different, what is a canvas, what is all these different things that you can interact with, and then that way you just get understanding of how it works. So the GUI is really, really great, and why I love Unity, because you no longer need to know how to program a button, or if you're ever using JavaScript, HTML to place a button. Here you could just create a canvas, drag a button, and suddenly you have a button and can easily scale how big the button is, how 3D it becomes. Or if you wanted a keyboard on there, there are keyboard assets that are free, and you can just very easily drag and drop a keyboard. And so there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to what you want to do and how technical that you want to get. Basically, the 3 things that it consists of is a canvas, which is just importing any sort of UI element. There's text, so if you want to, have words on the screen, and events and triggers, and this goes back to the gaze interaction thing. So if you place a button, then you could add an event to it, and is the trigger on click, which would be like a tap or pulling the cardboard trigger, or is it by gaze? So you can set after 3 seconds of someone looking at it, then how does it interact, etc. So before doing this talk, I never really understood the camera. I knew that it was very important to designing, but then when I was doing this talk and trying to figure out a way to explain to you guys how the camera works, if you think about the camera, think about it as like when you're looking at a 2D screen, you don't know how to, I'll let that pass. When you're looking at a 2D screen, you have no real way of understanding where your user is in the experience. So the camera, if let's say that you're designing an experience and you want the person to feel like a god, then you would put the camera really, really high up in the experience, and then you would see everything else farther below. That way, when you actually were in the experience, you would be the camera and you'd be really, really high up. Or let's say you wanted to be very close to the elements, then you would put the camera very close to the elements. And it just helps, it's a starting point for how the user should look. Also, if you're creating a first-person shooter, you want the camera to follow the user at all times. And when you're integrating the Oculus SDK, the Google Cardboard SDK, it auto-assigns where the camera should be. So when you're just prototyping, that they kind of take care of all of that for you, and it's not something you have to really think about. But the more technical that you get and the more experience-driven that you get, you can start playing around with where the camera is, and it creates very different experiences. Oh yeah, that's a good. Scale. So I find that scale is one of the most important things when it comes to designing. For example, this chair. If you want somebody to feel like a normal person, their size, then this would make somebody feel very weird because you couldn't fit in this chair, right? But if you had a storyline that was like, you are a mouse, and so everything that you look at will be small, and you put them here, then the scale of it would seem right. But whenever you're designing an experience, make sure that the text is Make sure that the text is like an accurate amount of distance away from you. Make sure that things aren't in your face, because it really disrupts presence, and that's one thing in virtual reality that you really, really don't want to break. You want to make sure that the person feels safe and that they want to actually be in your experience, because if the scale is off, then they realize that they're not somewhere, like it feels very weird. And there's some really good demos that we can do that really test that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is by far one of my favorite things when I've been doing research about design. You can download this sample framework for free online, and if you have an Oculus, if you have a Gear VR, it's a free app that you can experience, and you can just go in, test every single one of these different practices, and change the depth of things, change the scale, change how big the text is, and it's been really helpful in terms of they basically built a Unity app for you that allows you to quickly see how things would feel. And the things that they most focus on are these 4 things on the left, which is crosshair. So crosshair, what it is when you're looking in an experience, sometimes the user doesn't really know where they're looking. So some designers will put like a little dot in front of them to help the user orient them and know where they are. So imagine if you're in real life and you always had a little red dot following you around, you'd always know where you're looking and where your attention is. I think people were using this a lot when they started experimenting with gaze interactions, because that helped the user really focus on where exactly they were looking and iterate that way. I haven't really seen it that much in apps or shipped apps. I've seen it more in prototypes, but I think it's still a really good way to prototype. Locomotion is how does somebody move in the experience. There's different ways to do it on Gear VR. Again, it's the touchpad, but is that the best way to do it? People still haven't solved the locomotion problem on mobile VR and really on tie-in headsets, so I would encourage people to experiment there and figure out what's the best way to move, because if you move too fast, you'll feel sick. Teleportation is the same thing. When you, let's say in mobile VR, you look and you tap and you transport yourself somewhere else, does that feel jarring? Is that too shocking? Is there any way to make somebody kind of flow into the experience? And Oculus has set up quite a few ways to experiment with different teleportation methods, and you can figure out what's the best thing for you. And then the user interface is again the scale thing, where it's if you have a menu, how close do you want it to be to your face? Can you move it farther away from you? Can it be on the side? Like, what are the different things that you can do? And they do an amazing job at this. It's on some of the phones, so you guys can play around with that and just test that out. So overall, just you want to make sure that people don't get sick. That's the #1 priority, because then they will not use your experience and tell their friends that you did not do that experience. Also, the nice thing about virtual reality is that you're not confined to the way that traditional things looked on a mobile phone. Like, a button doesn't really have to look like a button, but if you want it to be a button, you have to tell the user that it is a button until they learn that it is a button. And I've seen a lot of people use a lot of audio cues, which I find super helpful, because when people are reading in virtual reality, it still feels a little bit weird. People haven't figured out the exact distance, how much people want to read. So when someone is telling you what to look at, how to feel, like what something is, then you kind of just feel like it's almost like a teacher that's teaching you. And I find that very successful when it comes to prototyping. And the more assets that you include in your Unity application or in any application, the harder it is on the phone. So you want to make sure that you're using similar color palettes. You're not like importing a million spheres. If you're going to do a million spheres, then maybe like create one object and things that just make it easier on the phone. I would say the most I've ever learned about this is working with a developer when they have to take all of your designs and then actually build the project. So this is a lot of back and forth with developers, but I think it's something to be cognizant of as you design. Don't put a million assets into your project. Just be cognizant of that. So this is kind of how I started thinking about designing in VR. I would just sketch, and so I was like, I think I want something to look like this, and then I was trying to do it on a piece of paper and draw it out, but then I just kept showing it to people, like, oh, what do you think about this? And they were like, I have no idea what this looks like. This is terrible. So I was like, okay, then I'm gonna create I want to create an experience so that I can import all of what I'm thinking into Unity. Katya actually sent me this, and we can send you this file, and basically you just import it into a photosphere in a Unity project, and then when you put it in Google Cardboard, you can then quickly see, like, this is the content zone, this is the curiosity zone. So as you're designing, it helps you give you ideas as where should you put the assets that you're importing into your project. Which then led me to this. So I used the Learning Virtual Reality book that I had showed you before. And this is the crosshair, you can see that little thing there. And so I was importing different photos and importing different assets. These I just got off the Noun project. And we're just trying to see, okay, if I imported an object like this, what would it look like testing in the headset? And this is like a full one-day process of going back and forth about, does this 2D object make sense? Should it be a 3D object? And I tried a bunch of different things, and I actually ended up liking the 2D objects. And then this was the final result of those tests. So this is a photo, and then that's the crosshair based on where I'm looking. It should change. It's a prototype. Okay, so this is, if you guys want to get more involved in virtual reality, go to the meetups. Well, that's a really great way to just meet people. There's a lot of people thinking about design and thinking about how to make not only Unity better, but other prototyping tools better. There's a lot of people building new products that should help a lot of designers. And these are the top 3 websites, I would say, for virtual reality. My newsletter, of course. And then following influencers in VR. This is just a list of them, but there's a lot of people, and a lot of people are thinking about it. And if you guys have any ideas, the VR community is super receptive, and would love to have your input. So, does anyone have questions?